championship. What's your assessment of the current state of the Cavs?
Well, one of the things that we really benefited from was we were in a historically bad Eastern Conference. And all through those years, we really knew the target is the Western Conference team. There was nobody in the East who was really going to be in the way.
Yeah, right. The East was the LeBron Invitational for all of those years.
That now.
David Griffin just destroyed LeBron James's entire legacy in one interview. The former Cavaliers GM, who won a championship with LeBron, admitted the Eastern Conference was so bad they didn't even take the regular season seriously. 8 straight finals sounds impressive until you realize LeBron only faced one All-NBA first-team player in 8 years. The truth about those finals runs just got exposed by someone who was actually there.
LeBron James is a fraud. LeBron James, once again, proves that he's a Pat-standing clown and should never again, ever be mentioned in the same breath as the greats who have ever played this great game that we call National Basketball Association basketball.
Do you think LeBron's 8 straight finals are still impressive, knowing the Eastern Conference was historically terrible? Or does this confirm he was taking the easiest path possible? Drop your take below.
David Griffin was the general manager of the Cleveland Cavaliers throughout the whole stay, the second stint of LeBron James in Cleveland, when he came back from Miami up until the time that he left to the Lakers. Now, he's being asked about the current Cleveland Cavaliers team and, to acknowledge them and how great they are and all that other stuff. But during the answer to that question, he started talking about those years of the second stay of LeBron James and how lucky they were because the Eastern Conference was probably the easiest Eastern Conference in the history of the NBA.
Let's start with exactly what David Griffin said, because this is coming from someone who worked directly with LeBron James. This isn't a hater or a casual fan with an agenda. This is the general manager who helped build the team that won Cleveland's championship in 2016. When he speaks about LeBron's finals runs, he's speaking from first-hand experience about what those years were actually like. Griffin said, "One of the things we really benefited from was we were in a historically bad Eastern Conference. All through those years, we really knew the target is the Western Conference team. There was nobody in the East who was really going to beat us." Read that again. The GM is admitting that for 8 straight years, the Cavaliers knew before the season even started that nobody in the Eastern Conference could beat them. They weren't worried about the playoffs. They were worried about whoever came out of the Western Conference, because that was the only real competition they'd face. Griffin continued, "The East was the LeBron Invitational for all of those years." That's not my phrase. That's not something a YouTube commentator made up. That's LeBron's own general manager calling the Eastern Conference playoffs a formality, an invitational. Like LeBron was being invited to the finals every year because the competition was so pathetic that showing up was basically enough.
I think what ended up happening ultimately along the way was it changed our perspective to such a degree that you saw us. Even the first year we were together, I think we were 19-20 in our first 39 games. And then we run off this historic run in the second half of the season. But guys weren't taking the season seriously.
But it gets worse. Griffin then compared those years to the current Cavaliers team with Donovan Mitchell, saying, "What they're doing is going to be more impressive when they achieve what they're capable of. The Eastern Conference is significantly more competitive than what we had." Let that sink in. The GM who worked with LeBron is saying that a completely different Cavaliers team reaching the finals now would be more impressive than what LeBron did 8 times in a row. Because the competition has improved. Because there are actually real teams in the East now. Because making the finals actually means something. Griffin even admitted that players on those LeBron teams didn't take the regular season seriously. He said they went 19-20 in their first 39 games one year because guys weren't taking the season seriously. Why would they? They knew nobody was beating them in the playoffs regardless of their record. The regular season was just practice for the finals.
A violation. So they'll do it again.
You know, in those plays, and that was on LeBron James, those plays often go unnoticed. He makes this shot, you know, people will forget about it. These are the type of plays in this tight of series that can make the difference between winning or losing.
Let's talk about the actual numbers, because they're devastating for LeBron's legacy. During those 8 straight finals runs, LeBron only played against one All-NBA first-team player. One. In 8 years. That's not an exaggeration. That's the actual statistical reality of the Eastern Conference during that era. The competition was so bad that the Atlanta Hawks had 4 All-Stars one year. Kyle Korver was an All-Star. A 34-year-old spot-up shooter who couldn't create his own shot was deemed one of the best players in the Eastern Conference. That's the level of talent LeBron was competing against. Paul Gasol was the starting center in the East All-Star game while playing for the Chicago Bulls. How many people even remember Paul Gasol playing for the Bulls? That's how forgettable that era was. The talent was so diluted that washed-up veterans from better days were representing the conference.
There was no part of me that believed we were losing. And it was one of those things that I just believed to the core of me, but it was because I felt like the only way we could win was to dig the hole we dug. That group needed it to be like that.
That's wild, isn't it?
For whatever reason, they were so spoiled by success and needed it to be so damn difficult. They put themselves in a position that only they could overcome. But that was the greatness of that group. They lived for make it messy.
The Western Conference was so much better that the All-Star games were blowouts. The West would destroy the East every single year because the talent disparity was obvious to everyone watching. It got so embarrassing that they had to change the format entirely. That's when we got Team LeBron versus Team Curry, because having East versus West was just highlighting how terrible LeBron's conference was.
What Ty Lue did at halftime to challenge LeBron, there's going to be a 30 for 30 on that moment and what it really did to LeBron. He was the best of his angels that second half in a way that he couldn't have been without Ty Lue. And Ty knew it. And to have the gift he had at that moment for handling that situation. And then for our locker room to deal with Ty Lue going at him the way they did and to redirect LeBron to get the benefit out of it, that's a James Jones thing. That's a Channing Frye thing. That's an RJ thing. That's a J.R. Smith thing. That's a, look, man, is he right?
Let's compare this to other great playoff runs. Michael Jordan beat 20 teams with 50 or more wins during his playoff career. Kobe Bryant beat 26 teams with 50 or more wins, which is the record. LeBron James has played more seasons in the NBA than he has beaten 50-win teams in the playoffs. That's not a typo. He's been in the league longer than his total count of playoff victories against quality teams. Kobe Bryant is the only player ever to beat 4 50-win teams on the way to a championship, and he did it without a top 75 all-time teammate. LeBron has never beaten 4 50-win teams in a single playoff run because the Eastern Conference never had 4 50-win teams for him to play against. During LeBron's 8-year finals run, the Eastern Conference would have 2, maybe 3 50-win teams in a good year. Meanwhile, in the Western Conference, you needed 50 wins just to make the playoffs. The 8th seed in the West would have been a top 3 seed in the East. That's how massive the gap was. Griffin's admission validates what critics have been saying for years. LeBron chose the path of least resistance. He went to Miami when the Eastern Conference was weak. When that started falling apart, he went back to Cleveland specifically because the East was still weak. He knew he could coast to the finals every year without facing real competition until June. And the stats prove it worked exactly as planned. LeBron's playoff performances in the Eastern Conference were significantly better than his finals performances against Western Conference teams. Why? Because he was playing against inferior competition for 3 rounds before finally facing a real contender. Look at who LeBron was playing in those Eastern Conference playoffs. Derrick Rose with 1 ACL and 1 meniscus. The Indiana Pacers with Paul George and not much else. The Toronto Raptors, who were famous for choking in the playoffs. The Boston Celtics with an aging core. These weren't legitimate championship contenders. These were good regular season teams that crumbled against real stars. Griffin even mentioned how Toronto beat them one year, and he attributed it to the city of Toronto as much as anything else. Not the team, not the coaching, the city, the crowd energy. That's how weak the competition was. A decent crowd was considered a legitimate threat to LeBron's finals run. The second-best team in the East every year became a meme. Whoever finished second was just fodder for jokes about getting swept or gentlemen swept by LeBron. It wasn't competitive. It was a formality. Everyone knew LeBron was going to the finals. The only question was how many games his opponent would manage to win. This context completely changes how we should view LeBron's finals record. Yes, he went to 8 straight finals, but he also went 3-5 in those finals against actual competition. When he finally faced Western Conference teams that had fought through a gauntlet to get there, he lost more often than he won. Compare that to Michael Jordan, who went through a much more competitive era and went 6-0 in finals. Or Kobe Bryant, who faced multiple 50-win teams every playoff run and still won 5 championships. LeBron's path was objectively easier, and his finals record reflects what happens when he faces real competition. David Griffin also revealed something else important in past interviews. He said working with LeBron was overwhelming because of the pressure to win immediately. He felt like he had to trade future assets and overpay players just to keep LeBron happy in the short term. That pressure contributed to Griffin wanting to leave even after winning the championship. Think about what that means. The GM who won a championship was so exhausted and frustrated by the experience that he wanted out. That tells you something about what it's like working with LeBron behind the scenes. The control, the demands, the constant pressure to sacrifice long-term success for short-term wins. Griffin also pointed out that LeBron receives all the credit for wins and none of the blame for losses. This is a pattern throughout his career. When the team wins, it's because LeBron is great. When they lose, it's because his teammates let him down or the coach made bad decisions. That narrative has protected his legacy for years. But people who actually worked with him are starting to tell a different story. Griffin is admitting the Eastern Conference was terrible. Other executives have hinted at how difficult LeBron is to work with. Former teammates have subtly criticized his leadership style. The perfect image is cracking. The stat-heading accusations tie directly into this. LeBron stays in blowout games to chase statistical milestones while claiming he's managing his body and health. He sits out against tough opponents while playing heavy minutes against weak teams where he can rack up numbers. That's not coincidence. That's calculated legacy management. Griffin's comments about the Eastern Conference being an invitational apply to LeBron's entire approach to his career. He's always chosen the easiest path available while maintaining the narrative that he's facing impossible odds. He went to Miami to team up with 2 other All-Stars. He went back to Cleveland when the East was historically weak. He went to the Lakers and immediately demanded they trade for Anthony Davis. Every move has been about maximizing his chances of winning while minimizing the difficulty of the path. And there's nothing wrong with that from a strategic standpoint. But you can't claim to be the greatest of all time when you spent your entire career optimizing for the easiest possible route to success. The comparison to Kobe Bryant is particularly damaging for LeBron. Kobe stayed in the Western Conference his entire career, facing multiple 50-win teams every single playoff run. He won championships without other top 75 all-time players on his roster. He beat 4 50-win teams in one playoff run, something LeBron has never done. And Kobe did all of this while playing in a significantly more competitive conference. LeBron fans will point to the 8 straight finals as proof of consistency and dominance. But Griffin just admitted that consistency was built on facing historically weak competition. It's like bragging about being the smartest person in a room full of people who didn't graduate high school. Yeah, you're the best in that room, but it doesn't mean much. The finals record of 3-5 becomes much more important when you realize those 5 losses came against the only real competition LeBron faced during those years. When he couldn't coast through weak Eastern Conference teams and actually had to beat elite Western Conference squads, he lost more than he won. That's the actual measure of his performance against quality opponents. David Griffin just confirmed what critics have been saying for years. LeBron's 8 straight finals happened because the Eastern Conference was pathetically weak. They didn't even take the regular season seriously because they knew nobody could beat them. When LeBron finally faced real competition from the West, he went 3-5. The truth is out from someone who was actually there. Hit like and subscribe for more reality checks.